Modern cruise ships are incredibly safe. Not only is it in the best interests of the cruise lines themselves to invest in safer, less sinking ships, but international safety standards require all cruise ships to adhere to strict design standards. However, tragedies do happen. If you've ever wondered how many cruise ships have sunk in history, we have the answers you're looking for. Today, we are going to take a look at these rare but tragic events. We'll cover some of the most famous sinkings in the history of the cruise industry and explain how common these events are in the modern era. While sinkings of large ships are rare, they are even rarer when discussing cruise ships. Over the past 100 years, only 24 full-size cruise ships have sunk. In some of these cases, the sinking occurred while the ship was being towed for repairs or when the ship was headed for scrapping. Many times, when the sinking occurred, the ship was acting as a warship. It's also worth noting that most of these sinkings occurred before 1940, which is a testament to improved safety and how innovation in ship design has reduced the likelihood of cruise ships sinking in modern times. Now let's finally move on to the liners that sank over the past 100 years. Titanic, April 1912. Perhaps the most infamous cruise ship sinking occurred on April 14, 1912, when the Titanic struck an iceberg. It was completely underwater in about 2 hours. Unfortunately, the ship did not have enough lifeboats, and most of the passengers did not survive. The sinking of the Titanic resulted in the death of more than 1,500 people. Empress of Ireland, May 1914. The Empress of Ireland was carrying around 1,500 passengers when it collided with the Storstad from Norway due to fog limiting visibility. A total of 1,012 people died. RMS Lusitania, May 1915. When the liner was owned by the Cunard Line, it was the largest passenger ship in the world. On May 7, 1915, a submarine hit the Lusitania with a torpedo off the coast of Ireland. The ship quickly sank, and the crew launched only 6 lifeboats. About 1,200 people died. Britannic, November 1916. Britannic, sister ship to the Titanic and another ship called the Olympic, was supposed to sail as a passenger ship, but World War I began and plans changed. It served as a hospital ship and was struck by a sea mine between the islands of Makronissos and Kea in Greece. Although it sank in just 55 minutes, only 30 people died as most of those on board boarded lifeboats and were rescued. Principessa Mafalda, October 1927. In 1909, the Italian cruise ship Principessa Mafalda sailed between Buenos Aires and Genoa. In 1927, a broken propeller shaft damaged the ship's hull and it sank off the coast of Brazil, killing just over 300 people. Saint-Philibert, June 1931. On June 14, 1931, the Saint-Philibert sank off the coast of France. The death toll was about 500 people, and only 8 people survived. Georges Philipar, May 1932. Georges Philipar was a French ocean liner that sank near what is now Yemen during its maiden voyage. They considered delaying the launch due to safety concerns, but were ignored to avoid penalties for the delay. Ultimately, an electrical fault led to a fire in the luxury cabin. The ship sank, killing 54 people. Morro Castle, September 1934. On September 8, in the smoker's cabin, a passenger asked a steward if he could smell smoke. After a short search in the writing room, they discovered a fire in a closed cabinet. Smoke spread into the dance salon on Deck B, but no one paid any attention to it. Quite quickly, the fire spread through the corridors of the ship, fanned by a strong wind. Witnesses spoke of blue flames flowing down the staircases and corridors. Many passengers slept in their cabins drunk or seasick. No one provided a command to warn passengers about the fire. Many suffocated in their sleep or were unable to leave the cabin due to the fire. People gathered in the stern, where the wind was driving fire and smoke. In the end, people driven to despair began to jump overboard, throwing life preservers, vests, and deck chairs there. Some of the passengers were able to swim to the shore, later saying that the boats from the liner refused to pick them up. Many passengers were rescued by small ships that went out to sea. Of the 549 people, 137 died. Empress of Britain, October 1940. It was a steam turbine-powered ocean liner that carried passengers between Canada and Europe between 1931 and 1939. It was the largest, fastest, and most luxurious ship on this route at the time. On September 2, 1939, Great Britain declared war on the Nazi Empire in World War II. On November 25, the Empress of Britain was requisitioned to transport troops. During her service, she made several transatlantic trips with troops from Canada to England. On October 26, 1940, the Empress of Britain was bombed, and on October 28, she was sunk by a German submarine. Andrea Doria, July 1956. On the way to New York, the Stockholm passenger liner collided with the Andrea Doria, and the ship immediately began to list and take on water. Half of its lifeboats were underwater, which could have led to significant casualties, but the ship did not sink immediately. It stayed afloat for more than 11 hours. Thanks to the crew's actions, improved communications, and the quick response of nearby ships, 1,660 crew members and passengers were saved. About 50 people died. Bianca C, October 1961. The Germans first sank the Bianca C during World War II. Workers lifted its hull and converted it into a cruise ship. On October 22, 1961, while parked off the coast of Grenada, an explosion occurred in the engine room. A fire broke out on board, and the ship sank. Almost everyone left it. There was only one casualty. Angelina Lauro, September 1979. Angelina Lauro first went to sea in 1939. It was intended to be a ferry but was converted into a hospital ship during the war. When the war ended, the Angelina Lauro served as a passenger ship sailing around the world. She was sold in 1964, converted into a cruise ship, and set sail on her maiden voyage on March 6, 1966. In March 1979, the Angelina Lauro caught fire while docked on St. Thomas. The fire continued for several days, weakening the hull. The ship filled with water and sank on March 30. Mikhail Lermontov, February 1986. In 1972, Mikhail Lermontov entered service as an ocean liner. 10 years later, it became a cruise ship. The ship left Sydney on February 6, 1986, for a 2-week cruise around New Zealand. The ship, Mikhail Lermontov, encountered underwater rocks near Cape Jackson 10 days after its voyage. Most of the 743 passengers and crew on board were saved in a lifeboat. The only casualty was crew engineer Pavel Zagladimov. SS Admiral Nakhimov, August 1986. In 1925, the Admiral Nakhimov sailed as the passenger liner SS Berlin. At that time, it was a hospital ship and a passenger ship. In August 1986, the ship had an accident in Seames Bay on the northern coast of the Black Sea. The ship quickly sank, killing 423 people. Motor ship Jupiter, October 1988. Originally named Molodid, this Greek cruise ship first set sail in 1961. On October 21, 1988, the MV Jupiter was hit by an Italian cargo ship off the coast of Greece during a 2-week familiarization cruise in the Mediterranean and sank soon after. Including students, crew, and adults, there were approximately 600 people on board. 2 crew members, 1 teacher, and 1 student were killed. MTS Oceanos, August 1991. The Greek-registered ship sank while traveling from East London to Durban in South Africa through rough seas. The storm intensified as the ship sailed on. There were also problems with the ship's waste disposal system, and a vital ventilation pipe was broken. The pipe burst, and the ship filled with seawater. The captain and crew left the ship. Fortunately, the artists on board took over the rescue efforts, and there were no casualties. MS Estonia, September 1994. The sinking of the Estonia, formerly called the Viking Sally, was one of the worst maritime disasters in history. The ship was sailing in the Baltic Sea when passengers and crew heard a bang, followed by similar noises over the next few minutes. At about 1:15 a.m., The bow cap at the front of the ship separated, the loading ramp opened, and the ship sank. The people in the cabins had difficulty reaching the boat deck. A total of 850 people died. MS Achille Lauro, December 1994. In 1965, the ocean liner Willem Ruiz was converted into a cruise ship and renamed MS Achille Lauro. The ship experienced several incidents. In 1953, it collided with the Angelina Lauro, although neither ship was seriously damaged. In 1975, it collided with a cargo ship and was hijacked in 1985. There were numerous explosions and fires on board in 1965, 1972, and 1981, but the last fire in 1994 sank her. On November 30, a fire occurred while the ship was heading to South Africa. The ship began to list, and the next morning, most of the 979 people on board were evacuated. 2 people died, and the ship sank on December 2. Sun Vista, May 1999. Sun Vista entered service in 1963 and sailed on several cruise lines as the SS Galileo Galilei until it sank on May 20, 1999. She served as Meridian, the first ship for celebrity cruises, and became Sun Vista in 1997 when she sailed for Sun Cruises. There was a fire in the engine room, and the ship sank in the Strait of Malacca, the main shipping channel between the South China Sea and the Indian Ocean. All people on board left the ship safely. Britanis, October 2000. Entered service in 1932 as the ocean liner SS Monterey. The ship eventually sailed for Fantasy Cruises in 1971, but Chandris, who was running Fantasy Cruises, turned his attention to another brand and went out of business with Fantasy Cruises. 17 years later, in 1988, the ship was sold and renamed. Plans changed, and it was sold for scrap. The ship began leaking while on its way to a scrapyard. The ship was empty. It capsized off the coast of South Africa near Cape Town. SeaBreeze, December 2000. This ship set sail in 1958 for Costa Cruises as Federico C. In 1983, it moved to Premier Cruises. During the voyage, it was renamed 3 times. In September 2000, Premier Cruises ceased operations, and the SeaBreeze was laid up. Cruise Ventures 3 purchased it, and while on a voyage from Halifax, Nova Scotia, to Charleston, South Carolina, the boiler broke down, causing extensive damage. The ship sank off the coast of Virginia. All 34 crew members were rescued. MV Explorer, November 2007. MV Explorer began life in 1969 as MS Lindblad Explorer, a unique vessel sailing the Antarctic Ocean. It set off on a 19-day cruise from Argentina on November 11, 2007, and 12 days later, it crashed into an iceberg in Bransfield Strait near the Falkland Islands. The iceberg caused significant damage to the ship's hull, and water began to fill it. All 153 people on board were able to escape in lifeboats and were rescued by the MS Nordnorge 5 hours later. MS Sea Diamond, April 2007. MS Sea Diamond first sailed on Burka Line Cruises as Burka Princess. She was renamed Sea Diamond when she was purchased by Lewis Cruises in 2006. In 2007, it ran aground near Santorini and eventually sank. Almost the entire crew and passengers escaped safely, but 2 people were missing. Costa Concordia, January 2012. The liner entered service in 2006. On January 13, 2012, it set off on a week-long cruise in the Mediterranean Sea with about 3,000 people on board. The captain veered off course on his way to his first port, passing close to the island of Giglio off the coast of Tuscany. A few hours after setting out to sea, it hit a large rock. The ship suffered serious damage to the hull, it sank and lost power, and the rudder was so positioned that the ship could not be steered. Everyone on board had to be evacuated, and 32 people died. So, as you can see from this brief overview, cruise ships rarely sink these days. Over the past 100 years, only 24 ships have completely sunk. Most of these disasters occurred before the 1940s, reflecting significant improvements in safety and new technologies in shipbuilding. However, although modern cruise ships are extremely safe and reliable, tragedies cannot be completely ruled out. As some recent incidents, such as the sinking of the Costa Concordia in 2012, show, even minor mistakes or negligence by the crew can have catastrophic consequences given the size and complexity of these giant floating hotels. However, the cruise industry continues to improve, and international safety requirements are becoming more stringent. So while no sailing trip is completely safe, cruising today is safer than ever before.